Hey, I'm Ossie from Three Monkey Solderless, home of the world's best cables for your pedal boards. We got the audio, we got the DC, we got them. Check us out, Three Monkey Solderless, hit the link below. Okay, zero preparation right now. What is that? And I'm basically a soup sandwich. So don't expect a whole lot today. Or maybe it'll work out, I don't know. So doing lots of soldering, lots of work. And have been listening while I'm working to some albums, some vinyl. And Fair Warning found its way onto the platter. So I was listening to that repeatedly. And I think it's, it got me into some, ideas and some thoughts and possibilities and, maybe things that are observations and what have you about the sound. And I thought we'd just go over, a couple of things and just play around with, some toys. I haven't done any prep work other than to just set this stuff up and make sure that it's actually working so that I can have, I won't have to sit there and go, why isn't that working? Why is it? That's about it. But I've had way too much pink drink, so I'm kind of going to be a little all over the place. So what I wanted to talk about was like some sounds on Fair Warning and then some possible reasons why things sounded the way they did. And then some observations about the general sound of that album, of his guitar tone. So I think the first thing that I wanted to talk about too was Hear About It Later. And we've discussed this maybe a month ago or maybe more or less. I don't know. But how that track was the beginning of it and how it was recorded, which gave us some clues into the signal chain that, might have been going on. I mean, there's some interesting stuff that was happening. Once again, I sat on my glasses and there's some interesting stuff going on, which gives us some clues. So once again, for those that didn't listen to why would you want to watch everything on this channel? But if you haven't, like Hear About It Later thing, let's listen to that and let's get the copyright strikes going early. But what I want to point to you is you're going to hear that this is the actual track that they used for the album. No question about it. If you know the album, you know the material, this is it. It's, from, these leaked outtakes. So it's an unusual sort of mix of tracks for this. It's the beginning, and what it shows is, or what you hear is Ed's guitar going through a flanger, right? And then into a guitar amp, a Marshall or whatever it could be, the Marshall, in a room and a microphone, and then it crossfades into that pristine, clean sound that we hear on the album, right? So that leads you to some interesting conclusions. So let's just listen to it, right? Here we go. So you hear the distortion. And now adds the pristine. And then it'll fade out. Okay, I could be tempted to listen to the whole song, but we can't. We got time. That's an awesome song. So what's going on there, right? Obviously, his guitar signal was diverted after the flanger into two directions. And it was going, in my opinion, into the console, into the control room, into the console, as well as going into the front end of the Marshall with whatever else was there. So, the easiest way to do that sort of a thing would be, we have up here on some of our accoutrements for this sound. So we have the Boss pedal, right? The graphic EQ, and I'm taking out some high end out of it and giving it a little bit more of a focus sound. We've got the old style flanger, and then I've got this Q strip, which will just like mimic, a a console's, channel strip. So what I theorize may have happened is that, Don is pretty practical, I think. So would he have just taken a lead from the console and just plugged it into there? Okay, so let's see what that would do, right? I mean, I'm sure you already know what this is going to do, but maybe not, right? Because I can't assume that everybody that watches the channel has owned an old 4-input, Marshall style amplifier like these, right? So these are all joined, the above and below, into high and low, all right? So when you would jump a channel, you would jump from one to another to combine the two. So you would take a jump cord or patch cord, plug it into here and plug it into here, and it would come out and into the next channel, right? So here what we can do is sort of similar to that. Now I have some of these inputs into GarageBand so we can kind of, listen to them. And let's see, I'm gonna mute a bunch of this stuff. I just want to make sure that I know. See, this is the lack of preparation that's going on right now. So this one right here is going to be input 2. See, I knew that was dumb. Okay. All right. So let's see if we could sort of duplicate that effect. So let's open up one of these channels. Right, so I should give a quick rundown of what the signal chain is in a minute. But basically, this is sort of like the rough guitar tone. Then if we add in the flanger, right? Take out the... Now we're actually the flanger's in frozen mode. Hang on. There we go. Okay, so that's one sound that we hear, right? Now let's plug into here. We'll mute this track that has that guitar sound on it. Or no, we'll just leave it on. And we'll put on the dry, okay? Now I'm going to take out the overdriven sound. Got to set the level. I didn't set that. All right, so I think what we're basically hearing is, and I'm going to, try to do this with only one person. So we're hearing, at the very beginning, you're hearing this, right? And then it gradually fades out to... And if I mute this microphone, you'll get a better sense of what it sounds. Now we would need... Actually, it kind of sounds nice with this live sound in the room. That's interesting too, right? So if I muted even that, it sounds interesting that way too. Oop, we almost dropped that on the floor. That would have been good. Let's turn off this for a second. And then we can obviously adjust this to taste. Add some top. Add a little mids in. Well, you can obviously, get it closer with it. And then we would go into crossfade into this. And then you would add in the other sort of side of the chain. All right, so that's some observation, right? Bit of observation about maybe how the studio was sort of set up that day. All right, so then the next thing I kind of wanted to talk about, which was kind of interesting, maybe not, I don't know, is Unchained. So on that particular record, obviously we have, the flanger is coming in and out, right? And it's perfectly timed with everything, right? So let's see if we can hear that part again. I have it here somewhere. I have it here somewhere. So let's see. All right. All right. So you can hear how it goes up and down. Down. Now, Ed says that he gets lucky a lot with that. I tend to find that maybe was slightly incredulous, possibly. No offense whatsoever. But, all right, so number one reason is it's perfectly timed with everything, right? I mean, it goes up and down in the right perfect sequence. So you could say, well, you could get the speed exactly right and get the tempo of the song right, and then maybe it would get lucky and go in there. There's just one problem with that he takes a little bit longer on this other part where there's a longer gap, and yet it still comes in exactly right. So listen for the longer pause. Let's go back to the beginning again. Okay, this is the first time. Down. See right there? There's like a stutter, right? He kind of like resets, and the rhythm has a little stutter on purpose. Right? He gives it, and at the end, the flanger comes in once again at exactly the same time. Now, had it been set just for a particular sweep range time, that wouldn't have happened that way. So I think what we have to consider, or what we have to recognize, is that somebody was doing, if you set this speed down all the way, set everything down. I got to turn on the mics that we kind of got rid of. Okay. Right? So it stays pretty flat. I'm going to see if I can do this a little bit without dropping this Les Paul on the floor. So somebody was doing that. Now, I know Ed is very gifted, but I don't think he has three hands. So could he do it with his foot? Could he step on the button and rotate it at the same time with his foot? I don't know. I've seen some people do some crazy stuff with their feet. So who knows? But my guess is that the flanger was being controlled by a different entity other than Edward. So does that lead to the possibility that maybe the flanger was up in the room, up in the control room? So maybe the guitar, where we were discussing, went into the amplifier and came into here. Maybe that isn't the case. Maybe it went first into the flanger setup, then out to the control room, and then back through the pass-through into the main live room and into the amplifier. Now, if that's the case, that opens up an enormous amount of possibilities about what you could do for recording. So you could add channel strips. You could add all kinds of interesting effects into the front of the amp. You could sculpt the sound a little bit more with, let's say, the channel strip EQs versus, the pedal EQs. There's just, you could boost the front end of the amp a little bit. You could, boost different frequencies. So if we're looking at that being the case, it's, it opens up a world of possibilities. So that's pretty cool, I think. Now, the other thing which was interesting about the Unchained thing, right, is it has this really unique sound to that song. I mean, let's listen one more time to just like the track, right? A little bit of it. Right? Just even that first chord. Right? So a few weeks ago, let me put on this other track, which is sort of some let's say some little bits and pieces that probably didn't make it, or hidden in the album, or hidden in the track, or left on the cutting room floor, so to speak, or what have you. But let's listen to this too, right?
Here's to your thin red line, lady. Ooh, I'm stepping over.
Right here. Right? So what we're hearing there is an octave. So in the previous video, or one of the previous videos, I had the little brown Boss octave. And I thought that was what he was using, because I know that somewhere or another, I saw a photo, and that was like in his rig somewhere, right? The Boss octave. And I'm like, okay, that may have been what he used. But, I did the video without doing my homework. So what we find is that pedal didn't exist in 1981, which was when the album was released. The Octave OC2 wasn't released until 1982, according to what I can find out. Now, that could be wrong. And maybe, they sent Eddie this thing. Who knows? Because by that time, he's a giant. So, what goes on between artists and manufacturers is they get a lot of shit before you do. And there's a lot of testing going on sometimes. Or they just got a buddy that has them, these aren't coming out till next year. Let me throw you one. So that's possible. But at the same time, that OC2 sucks in terms of tracking. So I'm thinking more than likely it was done with the Eventide, because that has octave capabilities. It has all kinds of pitch shifting, micro pitches, all kinds of things. It also has a flange in it, which I think was important to the doubling the flange maybe on hear about it later on the beginning, because I'm hearing the normal MXR flanger, but I'm also hearing this other overlapping flange, right? Which was this flanger unit was so popular for everything. It's on all those records. I mean, they used to put the flange on like cymbal crashes to make them sound more splashy, to give them kind of like this psychedelic kind of effect to them. I'm smashing this microphone. Sorry about that. So, the flange could be on there. So, in Sunset Sound, I don't know how many of these they had, 910s or, the 949. But right now I only got one. My 910 died. So I can't use that. I'm going to send it out to get it fixed. There's a guy, Dean Beamish, who I'm in contact with, who's going to try to fix the thing, because he's got all the original parts, which, you can't get anymore. So to make the thing right, got to send it to my man, and we'll get it back. So in case of that, I'm just going to use this Eventide pitch factor, which has 2 channels. We're only going to be using one. And it has all the, the different sort of like things that a 910 or a 949 could do. So we're going to use, this octave down thing. So the Unchained thing, right? Well, let's listen to it. Let me unmute some tracks and we'll listen to what we got going on with all of this stuff. So put this on. All right, let's see if we have stuff. All right, so that's our bass guitar tone. And what we're hearing right now, all right, in terms of its, let me unplug this because we don't need it anymore. What you're hearing is this Les Paul, okay? So this is an old Les Paul. I'm not sure what year it is. I think it's either a 72 or a 73. You know what? Maybe you guys can help me out with that. It used to have waffle backs on it, right? Because you can see the imprint on it. So that made me think it's like probably a 72 or a 73. And that 74 would have different tuners on it. But anyway, this guitar sounds kind of fat. And I think, I think Unchained might have been done with a Les Paul. I know there's the Unchained guitar, but I'm thinking it may have been done with this, and a lot of Fair Warning may have been recorded with this. I'm going to smash into the computer. Hopefully I didn't smash the guitar too bad. Okay. Anyway, especially makes that chord a hell of a lot easier to play. But not that, Eddie, his hands were like monkey hands. They were gigantic. Anyway, so we got the Les Paul PAFs style into the front, or rather into the graphic EQ, right? Now, maybe we should listen to that for a quick second, because this is sort of like another interesting theory. I know I'm all over the fucking place, but excuse me. Did I whack the guitar? Yeah, I did. I'm sorry, guitar. All right, so we got to take off these two, and we're going to have to sort of replug this in again. All right, so I just want you to hear what we're kind of doing to the guitar sound. So get rid of this. Okay. So this is the unaffected, uneq'd sound. Turn on the... So I'm just basically trying to present the amp with something that resembles just the guitar sounds, right? Just the guitar frequencies. So it looks a lot like how Ed had his setup. Obviously, it's relatively lower than what Ed did, because I started at even and just started cutting. But if you move this up symmetrically, I think that would be somewhat of a shape that Ed used, or that we could see in the pictures. And I think what that helps to do is present the amplifier with less of a confused signal and a much more focused signal that gives you that kind of, more of a synthesizer, coherent, solid kind of sound that doesn't have a lot of like hysterical noises in it and a lot of baloney, a lot of, just high, squealy, picky kind of, obnoxious sounds. It also changes the way that your pick kind of sounds when it hits the strings, which is really important to guitar sounds, right? Because that transient oftentimes, in the psychoacoustics of our mind, defines the sound of the guitar. It can sound brighter or darker, or punchier or more scrapey, depending upon how the pick attack is. So this has a tendency to mellow out the pick attack a little bit, which I'm finding I like. All right, so we're going into the equalizer, right? Then into this here unit, this flange unit. Into the front of the marshmallow, everything's on gag. Obviously, the marshmallow has that line out sort of like deal in it, and all of the other weirdness. So the line out then is going into the Ox Stomp, okay? Which is, I just love this thing. And if you got a marshmallow, there's only 5 in existence, but if you've got one, and there's going to be 10 in total, but they're all gone. If you got one of the marshmallows, you got to have something like this. So you take the line out into the Ox Stomp. I've got it on the greenback setting, all right? Dynamic 57 mic, mono out. All right, so mono out, I'm going into the Eventide pitch factor, mono out of that into the Eventide harmonizer as input, and then the harmonizer has two outputs on it, right? We've talked about that. It has a main output and a delay only output. So the main output would carry the affected signal in terms of the pitch change. The delay only would have the delays only. And the delays are set with these push buttons down on the bottom. And in the last video with the Eventide in there, we sort of like showed how changing these delays around can give you sort of like a chorusy kind of sound or more of a frozen flange kind of sound. It can create the illusion of space. It's a very interesting unit. It has a little bit of tone tailoring in terms of low and high end on this EQ. Inside of there are these DBX compressor boards. So, you know, as much as this unit does pitch correction and all, or pitch changing and all that stuff, it doesn't have the creamy goodness, the chocolatey center, or the peanut buttery center that the Eventides did. The signal path in here is somewhere between like let's say a 1176 and an Atari 800. Right? That's where it exists in the world. Right in somewhere in there, like an Atari 400 computer, or, you know, maybe even a Commodore, and then a DBX compressor, right? A Dolby compressor or something like that. More pink drink. That's just what we need. So it imparts all kinds of goodness to it. So why am I still talking? Let's keep up with the sounds. So it's split out two ways, right? Main output, delay only output, and then going into my little Focus, right? And then into GarageBand. So that's what we got. So let's listen to that again. So this is not on right now. This is just the Eventide. So if I mute one side, add it back in. Okay, so we're sort of know the signal chain. Now let's once again listen to the overdubs, right? We're hearing that sort of. Right, so that to me, I'm hearing flanging, I'm hearing all kinds of crazy stuff, but I am hearing an octave sort of thing. So let's turn on the Eventide, and we can find. Okay, so that's one octave down. All right, so then we can add it. Let's turn it up so you can hear what it is. Right, that's a lot of octave. Mute the microphone. So that's maybe what we're hearing, you know, in that background. And obviously, maybe a little bit much. I mean, when you listen to that solo, you could definitely hear that it's in there. All right, so that's possibly what's going on there. Now let's listen to the regular, just the other Unchained track, right? And this has such a weird... Like, to me, that sounds like a derivative sound. Like, we're not, what I mean, that this sound that we're hearing is derived from his guitar sound and is not necessarily all his guitar sound, that it's a derivative of that. And by that, I mean that there's something that's exciting it. There's something that is, it just has this bizarre overtone to it. The chords, right? Just listen to the chords, how they, the note that it's giving, right? That whole thing. Now, if we turn up, let's say the wet mix on this, let's see. Right? That doesn't sound right. That sounds more like Michael Anthony's bass solo. I'm not going to roll around on the floor. I did that yesterday. So, I mean, what is it? It's definitely some kind of a chord that's made up of different pitches. But I mean, there's other things on this thing that we can use. So let's go through all of them. So this is off. So that's the octave. Huh. Interesting. I'm wondering, let me listen to it again. That could be a perfect third or a perfect fifth. That's blended in. Let's listen. All right, we're going to have to find perfect fifth. There it is. Perfect fifth. Now blend it down a little bit because we don't need much of it. May mute the microphone so I can hear this better. But this is staying in, this is, obviously a perfect fifth is great. I mean, obviously 1-3-5, you got a chord, right? So if you got a third and a fifth, well, that could be interesting. Could do both, maybe a third and a fifth. So you could do a third below or and a fifth above, or you could do a third and a fifth above, or a third and a fifth below. We're gonna have to figure out how to do that. Hold on, let me just listen to it. All right, so that is staying in tune. Let's try the third. Perfect third below. Do we have a perfect third below? And 5, 4. Where did the third go? It goes right over major third. I think my unit came without all the parts. Major third, minor third, unison, perfect fourth, flat fifth. Let's look at this perfect fifth above since we got it anyway. We're about at 8. I just want to hear. Interesting. Okay. All right, so that's a major third. That's interesting. I wonder, hang on a minute here. How much time are we on here? Because I don't want to keep you guys here all day. But this is, okay, we're at 30 minutes. It's 35 minutes or whatever. That's fine. I wonder if you could hook this thing up this way. Let me mute these things so we don't hear some pops. What if I took, all right, let me unplug. So this is going into the harmonizer. Let's put that aside. I need another cable. Another Tree Monkeys cable. And let's take the output of that and feed it into the input of the second input, second channel. Hopefully these things are totally isolated from one another, and get the output from number 2. So what we got, possibly, we'll find out if this works. Maybe when I hit the mics back on, it'll be squealing like nobody's business. So cover your ears. So we got the input for one of these mixes, right, for pitch A, and then outputting into number 2 for pitch B. So they're going to stacked. So we got the 2 channels right now in series instead of in parallel. I wonder if that's going to work. All right, so let's see. I'm just going to unmute real quick. Oh, no feedback. Okay. Let me turn it off. There we go. All right, so we want mix on both. So let's try maybe an octave on one, an octave down. There we go, an octave down. And let's try on the other one. Let's try a perfect fifth. There we go. All right, so we should have an octave and a perfect fifth. You know what? Let's how they're stacked is going to matter, so we should try it in reverse too. Doesn't work for that. All right, let's rearrange it. Let's try the perfect fifth on this one. And let's go with the octave below on this one. So now it's the fifth before the octave. Let's see what that sounds. Not a huge difference. Let's do a perfect fifth and a third and a major third. I really wish that the other harmonizer was working. That could be what was going on. Let's try another setting and see what we can come up with. So let's do like a major third and a perfect fifth this way and see what that does. The other possibility would be double octaves. So let's go, that's a 2 octave. And then we can go to, let's try that. I like that. Yeah, I'm kind of digging that. The other thing, let's skip off of this for a second. Put this away. I'm getting a little bit of a latency now, so the computer is starting to go, help me, I'm frying. So we probably should start wrapping it up. Now, the other thing I wanted to sort of notice, and this is like another Don Landy thing for sure, is how close some of the production is on this album versus 1984. I know that sounds weird, but these are recorded in 2 different studios, right? 1984 was recorded in 1984 in 5150 studios. So Fair Warning, I believe, was Sunset Sound. Now the consoles were different. One was, an API, and the other one was, I can't remember who made the console, but it came out of like Western Studios, but it wasn't an API studio. It was kind of an interesting studio console with compressors on the boards, all kinds of weird things. But there's this tone, this high frequency sort of artifact that is in both of these recordings, both of these guitar sounds. So let's just listen to it again, and I've got a couple of things up here that you can hear. So let's do this and continue with the copyright strikes, and you'll hear what I'm talking about. The very top end. Okay? Compared to... On the very top of that, you hear that sort of spike fizz on the very top? It's the same frequency for both of these. So granted, the Panama guitar track is more distant, right? From a perspective of where the microphone was placed, at least in this particular track of it, right? And this Unchained track is literally like smushing your nose back through the back of your head. It's so front and present. But listen to that top end again. Right? There's a similar effect going on there for sure. Now it's interesting to chase that, because that would be the key to 1984 now. In my mind, that is it. Now, what is the process? That's the next thing I want to figure out, is what is that process that's giving it that other little bit of excitement at the very top? Is it an exciter? Like, what was the possible studio procedure for getting that? Now, granted, these are two different studios, but they used, like when Don was building 5150, and choosing the equipment, so to speak, of what would be in there. I think he wanted to make it, someplace that he was familiar with, right? He's not going to go and get a bunch of stuff that he hasn't used before. And the photographs of the studio, you could see, a lot of similar things. So there's Pultecs, there's, he used Langs, right? There was a Lang MIDI cues in there, which were sort of like the Pultecs. They may have a slightly different sound to them. I never used a Lang. Never had that. What else was in there? There's LA2As, 1176s. There were Eventides, There were Lexicon reverb units. I don't think that was the case. So of all that stuff, my guess is it lies somewhere between the 1176s, the LA2As, and the EQs, like the Pultecs. Now, is there another exciter in there that I haven't noticed? Like, I keep going back to that picture of his rack in 5150, where it's, behind the console, and you can see all the stuff there. And I think I've accounted for most everything on that, but I haven't seen anything that we can consider an exciter. So that's sort of like the next thing that I want to think about, is like, what is that frequency and where does it come from? So I think it's somewhere in the 3 to 5K range, that peak. And it seems to have some harmonics that go out throughout the whole spectrum, like a wider Q, but it's definitely like somewhere centered around there, around like 3.5, 4K. So that would be interesting to listen to, different ways of accomplishing that sort of thing. So I think that's probably enough torture for today. I got more work to do with the soldering iron, so I'm going to get back on that. And just going to have to keep thinking about what is that? What is that? What is making that sound, man? All right, so thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.